Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin.
Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, 25-year serial tech entrepreneur. My new book, Fail Hard, Win Big, came out in July here of 2025. This is my story of having 30 ventures with 20 failures and 10 wins. I used to be embarrassed by the fact to say, wait a minute, I really want to promote that I've had 20 failures. But if I was a Major League Baseball player, I'd be batting .333, and that could get you in the Hall of Fame. So all of my ventures, I've always built around building custom software to have better operational processes and procedures to create unique client experiences and raise enterprise value. Now I'm the CEO of Sonotified Technology. We are a nearshore software development company. And today we are joined from Reid Lentz out of beautiful West Palm Beach, Florida. Reid is an engineer, a multi-time CTO, and has the great title right now of head problem solver and AI leverager. Reid, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be here.
Reid, if you would, give our listeners a couple-minute background on your career and the journey you've had.
So the journey I've had, let's see here. It started off actually in an actuarial space. I thought, with a math and economics degree, that would be great. I found that I was a bit too extroverted in that space to be, making that a career. I luckily had an internship at FedEx before my senior year of college. So I worked to get back to FedEx, and really right around the end of 2007 is when I secured a spot back into the company. I immediately came into a group that was really situated for what was called .com measurements. It also had mobile application development. In that role, I worked on as a SWAT team member for specialized production support of their FedEx.com applications, as well as their distributed shipping, tracking, rating, etc. applications that went into customer warehouses. So think high volume label printing, and fulfillment operations. From there, I actually then stepped into a manager role. It was supporting the central application to FedEx Express. A package could not move, a plane could not fly, a customer couldn't interact in person with us without information that came from the system, largely based on a Z-series mainframe, which was my first exposure to that. I remember my boss asking me, how are you going to be successful in that space? Well, I don't know COBOL, so I'm going to have to delegate to be successful. That was the exciting part, but I picked a little bit of it up just to be effective, of course. In that role, I also got exposed to the TNT Express acquisition, which was FedEx's largest acquisition and probably will be in their history. We worked on an interoperability case over the first year and were successful across 3 different operating scenarios. Got the opportunity to travel the world. It even included many stops in Amsterdam where TNT was based. My wife jokingly calls it my mistress because I love that place. It's just one of those fun places. The people are great, lots of English. Also within that role, I helped design the architecture. I really led it from the operational system standpoint for what's called FedEx Onsite. So your ability to drop off a package at Walgreens or Albertsons, Kroger, etc. We were able to do that actually within 9 months to get it out in front of the customer by peak season. It's one of those what typically people would call internally Fred says projects. So, right, Fred Smith would say, I want this. And then at that point, all systems go. After leaving that role, I got promoted into a managing director role for FedEx Trade Networks, where I got to support their global infrastructure, all their locations, end user computing, an audit, a process group, basically the kitchen sink. But I also had software development for their clearance applications. Now this also, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, was a mainframe-based system, but we also had an I-series-based system that helped with the imaging because international trade documents, you need to see them. You need to actually transcribe them from one screen to the next to get the entry done completely. So as that role evolved, it really pushed me more into a director of software engineering position that was concentrated on international trade. And that was the exciting part because we were actually using AI and ML to work on auto classification of products. Now, our government doesn't like automatic classification, so it was recommended classification with confidence. So that was my first real foray into just concentrate in this space and see what you can do innovatively to drive operational efficiency.
Well, and it's certainly with a huge company like FedEx and just the sheer amount of volume that goes through, what great experiences to learn from, to say the least.
Yeah.
The logistics, the software dependencies, that would certainly be good training and breeding ground.
It was. Yeah, if you take just the central application to Express, I mean, we had what 600 first-tier consumers as it goes out, almost 2,000 second-tier consumers of the data from the application. So you start to really understand, solid testing strategies, communication, collaboration of changes. So it was jumping into the deep end, but it was jumping into the deep end intentionally. So that way I could expose myself to other areas of IT. I've seen architecture spanning longer than I've been alive, which is, some people will say boring, but I'd say it's actually really exciting to see these are the systems that actually run the country, banking, retail, healthcare, and even
I
logistics.
started my career at this little company called IBM, and
Yeah,
it is amazing how many of the world's systems still run on mainframes and off that technology. Everybody has been saying for the past 30 years that it's going away, and it's not. It's still the most powerful compute power out there, and it is amazing how much is still on that.
it is. Yeah, it's very
They don't
prevalent.
teach COBOL anymore, and it's yet the mainframe's not going away. So it's kind of interesting.
Now, everybody's got the strategy to get off of it, but I think it's more of the dedication to replace it. That's really what it comes down to in the
True.
background from experience, right? And advising other people on like, hey, how did you do it? I hate to say it, but it's grit and determination and even some risk taking because as you said, it's the best compute power you can have. And yes, that's true. Now, when you try to replace it with modern system architecture, you're not going to hit that type of performance. So you've got to get creative, you've got to prototype and newer technologies, newer patterns, and unfortunately just see what sticks. Throw it on the wall.
That's a tough balance,
Yep.
to say the least. So from FedEx, you've had multiple CTO roles. Tell us about
Yeah.
those.
So I stepped into the first CTO role, which was a 3PL startup. It was focused in sustainability. It was actually part of a wholesale distribution company that had been around for 30 years. And they were getting enough churn from customers of like, hey, we'd love it if you had a 3PL offering. We could keep everything under one roof. So I came in with the experience that I had within FedEx to say, hey, yes, we can build this from the ground up.
So
We went through.
before I just learned that term, not being in the logistics industry, probably 2 months ago about 3PL. Educate others who might not be familiar with that.
So third-party logistics, so just think you have a product. So, hey, I've got this phone case here and I'm selling it on Shopify. I'm selling it on Amazon. I'm selling it through eBay. So all your different marketplaces. And you're getting tired of pick, packing, and shipping out of your garage because your wife wants to park her car in there again. Well, at that point, you would engage a third-party logistics firm that would now start to receive your product, inventory your product, pick, pack, and ship your product, and then just handle returns and everything else so you can just concentrate on growing your business.
I was just exposed to that term 3PL, and it's such a massive industry. And thank you for explaining that for those who might not be as familiar.
It's great, and you get to see all different types of products, all different types of business leaders, and some people have some very big specifics, and if you start to sell through different retail providers, they have some very specific rules, we'll say. We eventually obtained the contract to fulfill for Walmart.com. And this was specifically in the video game side of things. So if you saw that it was, fulfilled by Walmart in the background, we were actually the pick, pack, and ship, and there was another distribution company that actually owned the product. We just housed it and pick, pack, and ship it. But you've got to conform to labeling requirements based upon geolocation. You've also got to get Walmart to approve it. So they have these things called routing guides, and you've got to follow them to a T. Otherwise, you can't be an approved partner to them. So, that was an exciting part in that role is growing the business. We eventually grew it from 0 to about 5 million annual revenue run figures, which was awesome. Taking something from nothing to something was an incredibly exciting time. I would say I learned more about myself in that 2 years, candidly, than I did in, we'll say, 7, 8 years of leadership in a big company, because you don't have that enterprise team that you can just pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I need some help on this. What do you think we should do? Now it was, well, this is on you, and you've got to go figure it
It's
out,
about rolling your sleeves up and getting down and dirty.
Yes.
As a guy who started 30 companies, yes, a lot different than the corporate world.
Yeah, yes, it's a lot different, a lot obviously more fast paced, and you make the decision and go. It's not, we got to have the pre-meeting before the meeting to get to the meeting to get to the decision to pass it back down. You make the decision and you live with it, and I think that's a good thing. You want to make sure, are you moving the decision down the tracks in the right general area, you're not going backwards, is what, I even pitched to my team of guys, if we come up to a decision, make sure it doesn't move us backwards. We can always make another decision to move it back on track if we think it's a little bit off, but in the background, like, we've got to move quickly. We've got to deliver what the customer needs.
So fast forward, Reid, now you run your own consulting practice where you're the head problem solver and AI leverager. Tell us about some current projects you're working on.
So the one that I went through with, we'll say, a friend's business, they're starting to get to some scaling problems where everything runs off of just a single database node. They're not familiar with some new modern architecture patterns. So as we started to go through to understand where their bottlenecks were, we quickly realized that, well, do you have a replicated read-only node that you could run a lot of the queries off of? They're running, numerous invoice requests, or they're doing, other data analytics, and everything's just being constrained at the database layer. So it was trying to help them design some new architecture to allow themselves to scale much more rapidly in the background. So that was one where, again, it's just exposure to what's out there. And then another one, I talked with a CTO friend here, which they're trying to increase the capacity of their development team. So how can they start to leverage some of the tools that are out there, some of the ones that I'm using, at least right now, Taskmaster. How do you keep straight of what you're trying to get done? I also use Cursor. Now I know everybody's up in arms with all the Cursor pricing stuff that just went around. And yes, did it throw people for a loop? They're trying to make it right, but I think it's still great. And then also leveraging something called Code Rabbit. So within your teams, it can help act as that second set of eyes, what's out there within your code base. It picks out replicated code. It picks out potential security vulnerabilities, excess logging. Hey, here's a best practice there. But for me, it was trying to get him to get his development team into a better IDE setup that says, hey, look, yes, you can take advantage of auto completions. You can have it even scaffold parts of the app. Now, this is where the developers really come in to make their dues here. Hey, yes, this isn't the right way to do it. So I've helped them to at least get into a better and more consistent development pattern for that. And they're starting to see some very quick gains. And hey, we can respond to this customer request. We can do this specific thing very quickly. So it's actually been very nice to say, hey guys, like, look, I've been working on this for the last few months, and I can unequivocally tell you, like, just start down this path and see where it fits, because it's not just make your developers better, it's how can you improve the product space as well. That I think, everybody's so concentrated on like vibe coding and all this other stuff that I think vibe coding has a place within your product team. I actually wrote a LinkedIn article about this, where even if you have like this much technical ability in your product team, inject some of these tools in there that they can just prototype it.
Yes.
And then at that point, if they don't like it, destroy the project. You're spending maybe $20 a month for the user to be able to go through and say, I've got this idea for a new product. And then you can actually see it, click it, feel it, run through, change this, change that. And you don't need a developer wasting time to prototype. It's all within your product team to then eventually deliver to the development team. And they could say, yeah, the code sucks, or maybe it doesn't. Great, I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to take that piece, plug it into the overarching solution and go forwards.
Well, that is the right approach with vibe coding, because as we've all seen, and tools are changing so rapidly, it's hard to keep up. But vibe coding is great for coming up with new ideas, new innovations. Yes. But typically what's produced from that is not scalable code you could do from, but it's got the ideas, it's got the concepts. And so very well put, because, you hear people say vibe coding is everything and that's all people should be doing. No. It's great for new ideas, thinking out of the box, but that's not scalable.
Well, it's taking it, like the way that I see it, it's helping to take, if you've ever seen the solution called iRise, it's something that we used at FedEx to do screen mockups to allow users to click and feel and see how everything would work before a developer would pick it up. You could also loosely say if you're going to do some designs within Figma, but this is like real life Figma. Like you could take it as that to upskill your product team that, again, create something and then just see what it is. And again, if it sucks, who cares? You've wasted maybe 2 hours, 3 hours just to prove out that this idea doesn't hold merit, or it does, yes, continue forward with it. So that's other stuff that I've helped even with some creators that I know online in the fitness and nutrition space, because again, it's a big interest of mine, where I've just told them, hey, you've got an idea for your own app. Now you see all these others out there. Maybe you try to create your own. Hey, let me take a look at what you're doing. What other best practices can I give them in the background? And I'm pushing them to things like Lovable and Bolt and Rourke. Those are the things that just go out there and try it. Emergent was something that was in there. I know they just have a new release out that I've still to play with. Just go try some of these tools and see, hey, this is good or no, it isn't in the back.
Being a CTO has been a challenging space it's a hard role. You have to be that technical leader. You have to have enough hands-on knowledge to lead and gain the respect of development teams. You also need to be able to explain to non-technical executives, justify existence and timeframes and budgets. What are you seeing as the biggest challenge that CTOs, CIOs, tech leaders are facing right now?
It's a great question. I think one of the biggest challenges is everybody keeps hearing about AI and everybody wants it in their business. And especially if you're in their startup space, everybody wants to add AI in because it'll make them more valuable. Now, if you're going to put it in there, you need to know how to back it up.
That's
So,
right.
I think, right. So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword of great. You want to say there's AI in your business, but if you can't answer how it works, then you don't have AI in your business. So I think the other part that people want it, but when it comes down to where can you start to insert these solutions, you've got processes that aren't documented. And that's where I spend typically a lot of time when I'm talking to these executives of how well do you guys understand your sales or customer support process? That's usually where you can start to put in some of these solutions pretty easily. Now, I'm not saying you need to understand every little exception of where the customer comes in from this vector and, has this answer or doesn't do this. I'm not saying that, but you need to understand structurally how does this continue to move along? Because if you don't understand your process, how can you optimize it? And I used this was another post I did where Henry Ford optimized his production line. I think it was something like 84 process steps to build a car, but he knew those 84 process steps. I think that's the exciting part in the background, that someone even that high understood it and then was able to take the ability to build a car in about 12 hours down to about 90 minutes. But if you don't understand some of your general processes, adding automation is just going to further amplify bad things that sit in your business. And you might be a successful business, but you're not going to be able to apply it accordingly.
So in the current consulting you're doing, what's your approach to opening other tech leaders' eyes to different ideas or different approaches, or even taking some more risks? What's your approach to help convince them within the political structures of their organizations?
So I'm a very big proponent of doing. So how much have they actually gone in and played with these tools to show how the value can be conveyed to their business partners? Not just going into ChatGPT and asking it to rewrite a slide deck for you, but it's saying, hey, look, if we wanted to inject this kind of a solution, what does it look like? Could you siphon off some resource capacity to build this and then display it to the business? So in the last CTO role that I had, we actually built out a sales chatbot. So we had access to a lot of messages that are with a customer, whether it was a WhatsApp message, a text message, or even an email. We started to look at what were successful interactions versus which weren't. And then we started to build out really an empathetic chat bot because we found that salespeople were just copying and pasting data back to a customer. Well, that's an easy one to do. We need to understand the questions in to provide the responses out. We also need to ground it and say, don't provide like discounts and everything. But I think by actually showing what's possible, instead of having it just be this buzzword or conception of, hey, it can help me reword things. No, it can actually do complex thinking if you allow it, but just build it and show it rather than just having it be a slide. Again, back to some of the creators, like go out there and try these tools, display it to other potential investors or customers. And if they give you bad feedback, great. Same thing within a business. If you can show something as real rather than on paper, so it's not a vaporware product, that's where I've at least found the most success.
So Reid, throughout your ventures, you've managed a lot of engineering teams, and, fast forward to, everybody's expected to be a 10X engineer where they could do more. Everybody only wants the most senior engineers, and interviewing engineers is getting harder to assess capabilities, especially when they're using AI assistants. with it and getting creative about it. What's your approach to hiring great engineers?
So I have a big one on, of course, having this kind of face-to-face interaction, in my opinion, right, as you start to interview them. The pieces that I like to go through is have them identify the solid principles. Now, yeah, they could use AI in the background to get the answers as to what it is, or they could even use just a basic Google search, and then they say, yeah, I've done that. But to me, it's okay, then great, then go through and explain these to me, like I'm an eighth grader or like I'm a fifth grader. And, if there's longer pauses, then, they're actually typing into something in the background. I'm not a fan of the leet code stuff. Can you memorize patterns? I mean, anybody's going to be able to apply a pattern in the background, and can they memorize it on the spot, whatever. But I like to understand just how they think as well. So can you convey to me the business value of what you've done? Like, great, you modernized the system, but what was the business value that came out of it? So I like to see that people can connect the reasons behind why they're doing the work. And they're not just, leave me alone. I'm sitting here with my headphones on, cranking out code all day. So I like to find like strong principles in the background and also the ability to tie it to business result.
Gotcha. Great advice. Reid, what's one brutal lesson you wish you would have learned earlier in your career?
What's a brutal lesson? I'd say less is more. And there's also another piece to that too that I'll say here at the end. So, don't overthink it. Perfection can get in the way of a lot of progress. As I got into the startup space, it was obviously you're not going to be as mature as an enterprise solution right off the bat. Like the principles sit there, and I'm not saying that I pushed it, but you can still produce some high quality things as long as you can step out of that perfection space, to get things done. So you don't always need like this and that check and this milestone, whatever. The customers want to see progress, and they also want to see usability. You may think but you really don't until you get basically who pays your check. I think that's another key component, that show them progress and continue forward. Don't wait for like, I got to keep building, I got to keep building. So that's why I'd say less is more. And then the other one actually came to me this past week. I was at a men's group, and somebody said a comment. This actually came from a 23-year-old kid, which was pretty wild. He said this quote of, their win is not your loss. And I thought that was a very interesting statement. And especially, I think you can get caught up with it in the enterprise world, where you see friends or other peers getting promoted. You don't know why. You take it as a like, why did I lose out on that? Be happy for them, show them that like, yes, that's great. Yes, I didn't get it, but like, how can you take that to improve yourself further? That was something I'd say I got caught up with, earlier in my career when he said this statement to the rest of the group. I was like, wow.
That's pretty
That's
surprising
impressive.
that would come from a 23-year-old.
Exactly. I wish I had half those smarts at 23, but when he said that, it's like a quote that's like burned into my brain now, that, I think those are the two things I wish I would have learned earlier, of like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be good, in my opinion. But then on the other side, celebrate everything. There's no reason why you shouldn't. And don't be bitter, and push yourself forward and say like, okay, I didn't, but here's how I can better myself. So
awesome. Well, Reid, thank you for getting uncensored with us today. I like your approach to how you attack problems with process, with being practical, with creating prototypes quickly. Any final advice you have for tech leaders as we wrap up the show?
I would say the final advice would be, don't have FOMO because there's a new tool that comes out every week and every seemingly day. Just get started and see what you can do and see how it can benefit your team. And if you can't see how it can benefit your team, then I would say take a look at your process. I think it's got to be the whole people, process, technology take to anything that you do. Play around with the tech, firm up your process, and then make sure you have the right people. It's not to say go out and clean house, because you might not have the right people, but you got to have a good mixture of people to deliver all this stuff. So
Great
don't be
advice,
scared.
Reid.
Just try it.
Thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. Stay bold and keep building, everyone. Thank you.
That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, My company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.